Noah Brenner walked out of his family mansion at 3:09 a.m., 3 minutes before every member of his family was found dead. Jacob Brenner built an empire on control, but not even he saw the Thanksgiving massacre coming. Charlotte Brenner spent years hiding her family's secrets, but the one secret she feared most escaped into the night. Grace and Ethan Brenner were found peacefully in their beds, yet nothing about their final night was peaceful. The Brenner family welcomed Thanksgiving with perfection, but by morning only one of them remained unaccounted for, Noah. Noah Brenner was always the quiet one. Nobody expected he would become the center of the world's most chilling mystery. Jacob and Charlotte Brenner thought they controlled every detail of their lives until someone controlled their deaths. Noah Brenner left behind a clean room, an empty closet, and the biggest unanswered question in true crime history. Grace Brenner's bedroom looked untouched, but the truth hidden inside the mansion was anything but calm. Ethan Brenner never saw the danger coming, and the only person who might have known vanished without a trace. The Brenner family was known across the wealthy town of Northbridge for their success, charity work, and spotless public image. Every Thanksgiving, their mansion became a symbol of celebration, with neighbors watching expensive catering trucks arrive and photographers capturing their smiling faces for magazines. To outsiders, the Brenners represented stability, generosity, and unity. Their home was often compared to a palace, decorated with marble floors, glowing chandeliers, and carefully curated art pieces. Everything about the Brenners looked polished, almost too perfect to question. Behind the closed doors, however, the family's life was controlled by strict routines that left little room for anything genuine. Jacob Brenner, the head of the household, demanded perfection from everyone in his home. He believed order proved strength, and he enforced it with an unshakable firmness. His day started before sunrise, where he reviewed his business operations and inspected the staff preparations. His family lived under a schedule he created, with every minute accounted for and every action expected to reflect the image he worked so hard to maintain. Even small mistakes were considered signs of weakness in Jacob's eyes. Charlotte Brenner, his wife, became the quiet enforcer of this lifestyle. She mastered the art of hiding imperfections, smoothing over arguments, and presenting a polished smile regardless of what chaos pressed beneath the surface. To her, image was everything. She managed social events with precision, selecting outfits, decorations, and even the topics of conversation to ensure the Brenners never appeared anything less than exceptional. When cracks began to show, she covered them quickly, refusing to let anyone outside the home see the truth. Their children Noah, Grace, and Ethan grew up under this unspoken pressure. Noah, the oldest, shouldered the heaviest expectations. Jacob saw him as the future of the family legacy, shaping him into the successor he envisioned. Noah's achievements were celebrated publicly but criticized privately if they weren't good enough. Grace, the middle child, often focused on staying invisible, hoping to avoid the constant comparisons between herself and her brother. Ethan, the youngest, absorbed the tense atmosphere without fully understanding it, imitating behaviors he thought would keep the peace. This year's Thanksgiving was meant to be larger than ever. Journalists were invited and business partners were expected to attend. Charlotte spent weeks preparing every detail, from the floral arrangements to the seating plan. Jacob planned to make a major business announcement, one he believed would cement the Brenners' reputation for years to come. The children were expected to appear cheerful and confident, acting as symbols of the family's unity. But beneath the polished surface, tension built quietly. Noah had grown distant, spending more time alone and avoiding family gatherings. Grace had become increasingly anxious, overwhelmed by the pressure of maintaining perfection during such a high-profile event. Even Charlotte sensed something was off, though she dismissed it, convinced stress was normal before such an important evening. No one realized that the carefully built facade was about to collapse in a way the world had never seen, and the Thanksgiving celebration the town had anticipated would soon become known for something far darker than holiday cheer. On Thanksgiving morning, the mansion staff arrived early, but nothing seemed normal. The front gate, which was always locked and monitored, stood wide open as if someone had left in a hurry or wanted anyone to walk in without resistance. The security system, usually armed with multiple layers of protection, had been disabled at 312 leaving a long gap where the house had been defenseless. Inside, the massive dining table had been arranged with polished silver, perfectly folded napkins, and steaming dishes prepared hours earlier. Every seat had a name card, each one placed with precision, waiting for guests who would never sit down. The house looked frozen in time, as though everything had been prepared for a celebration that vanished before it could begin. By noon, concerns began to grow among the staff. It wasn't unusual for the Brenners to sleep in on holidays, but the quietness inside the mansion felt different. None of the family members responded to calls or messages. Their vehicles remained in the driveway, untouched and neatly aligned. Even more unsettling was the sight inside the study, where every family member's phone lay abandoned on the desk, still charging but receiving notifications that no one attended to. The heaters had been turned off despite the chilly morning, creating a cold, stale atmosphere throughout the house. It felt as if the entire family had stepped out for a moment and simply never returned. Hours passed and tension spread among the staff and neighbors. Many of them had seen the Brenners preparing for this event for weeks, so their sudden disappearance seemed highly unlikely. One neighbor, who had a clear view of the mansion from her upstairs window, noticed that all the lights were still on from the previous night, something that never happened in such an organized household. She waited, expecting to see movement or shadows passing by the windows, but the rooms remained still. Eventually, Inez pushed her to contact the police, fearing an emergency was unfolding behind the walls of the grand estate. When officers arrived, they walked through the open gate with caution. Nothing showed signs of forced entry, yet everything felt abandoned. Entering the home, they expected to find the family preparing for the event or perhaps dealing with some minor issue that caused the delay. Instead, they were greeted by a silence, so heavy it felt unnatural, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The officers moved room by room, noting untouched food, idle appliances, and half-finished preparations that suggested plans interrupted suddenly. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken furniture, no overturned items, just an eerie quietness that wrapped around every corner. The deeper the officers went into the mansion, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. The home, once known for warmth, noise, and celebrations, had transformed into an empty shell with no trace of life. The contrast between the elaborate holiday setup and the unnerving stillness created a feeling of dread that grew with every passing moment. It was clear that something had gone wrong long before the sun rose that morning, and whatever had happened to the Brenner family had taken place silently, efficiently, and without warning. The dinner that was supposed to bring people together had become the beginning of a mystery that no one was prepared to face. As investigators moved through the house, they found the first body in the living room. It was Jacob Brenner lying near the fireplace in a position that suggested he had collapsed without any warning. There were no overturned chairs, no defensive wounds, and no broken objects nearby. His expression appeared calm, almost unaware of what had happened to him. The scene felt deliberate in its stillness, as though someone had taken great care to leave everything exactly as it was. For a man known for his controlling nature, the quietness of his final moments struck investigators as particularly unsettling. In the next room, Charlotte Brenner was discovered on the staircase landing. She appeared to have fallen, yet there were no injuries consistent with a struggle or an accidental slip. Her body had been placed neatly, her hands resting beside her as if arranged by someone who wanted her to look peaceful. Nothing around her suggested panic or chaos, which raised immediate suspicion. Moving up the stairs, officers felt the temperature drop slightly, the air heavier and colder as they stepped toward the bedrooms where the remaining family members were found. Grace and Ethan were both found in their own rooms, each positioned carefully on their beds. Grace looked as though she had simply drifted into sleep, with her blanket pulled to her waist and her favorite book resting beside her. Ethan lay with his hands folded neatly, his toys untouched on the floor. There were no signs of pain, fear, or resistance on their faces. The staging was too precise, too clean, and too controlled to be natural. Investigators instantly recognized that whoever was responsible wanted the scenes to appear serene, an unsettling contrast to the gravity of the situation. The news spread globally within hours. A high-profile family found dead inside their fortress-like mansion, with no evidence of forced entry and no indication of robbery. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was damaged. Even the expensive jewelry placed openly on Charlotte's dresser remained untouched. Every room was unnervingly tidy, as though whoever committed the act had moved with complete confidence and without the slightest rush. The eerie precision suggested deep planning rather than impulsive violence. Media outlets around the world focused on the chilling mystery. How could an entire family be killed inside a heavily secured home without anyone noticing? Experts and analysts began speculating, comparing the case to the most puzzling crimes in modern history. The mansion's extensive security system made intrusion nearly impossible. The lack of struggle across all 4 victims indicated they had been incapacitated quietly and simultaneously. But the most alarming detail wasn't uncovered until investigators completed their initial sweep of the house. One person was missing. Noah Brenner, the oldest child, was nowhere in the mansion. His room was intact, yet his bed had not been slept in. His closet appeared carefully emptied of a few personal items, suggesting he might have left intentionally or been taken. There were no signs of forced removal, but there were also no footprints, no fingerprints, and no digital clues pointing to where he had gone. His absence changed the direction of the investigation instantly. Authorities were left with 2 terrifying possibilities. Either Noah was a survivor running for his life, or the person behind the deaths of his entire family. Noah was a quiet, intelligent young man who kept to himself. Teachers described him as gifted, noting how easily he understood complex subjects, often finishing assignments long before the deadlines. Neighbors, however, remembered him differently. They said he was distant but polite, the kind of young man who avoided small talk and spent most of his time indoors. He rarely attended family events shown in magazines, appearing in only a handful of public photos compared to his siblings. While his silence was often dismissed as shyness, investigators later wondered if it was something more, a warning sign no one recognized. When detectives entered his bedroom, they found it in perfect order. The bed was made, the desk was clean, and everything seemed untouched. Yet a closer look revealed something strange. The closet was almost completely empty. Only a single pair of shoes remained, placed neatly at the back, as if Noah had intentionally left them behind. His passport, laptop, and duffel bag were missing, suggesting preparation rather than panic. There were no notes, no signs of forced packing, and no rushed movements. Everything pointed to a young man who knew exactly what he was doing. The security camera footage provided the most chilling clue. At 3:09 3 minutes before the entire system was disabled, Noah appeared in the hallway. He walked calmly, not hurried or frightened, carrying a backpack slung over one shoulder. His posture was steady and his expression unreadable in the dim light. He moved with a certainty that suggested familiarity with every step he took. Moments later, he exited through the garage door and disappeared into the darkness. The cameras cut out shortly after, leaving investigators with a disturbing question. Had Noah disabled the system himself, or had someone forced him to do it? The timeline made the situation more complicated. The family was believed to have died within a narrow window following Noah's departure, but the exact sequence remained unclear. Forensic teams could not determine whether Noah left the house before or after the deaths occurred. This uncertainty split public opinion. Some believed he was responsible and had staged the scenes carefully before escaping. Others thought he fled before tragedy struck, unaware of the horror unfolding behind him. Detectives across the country searched bus stations, airports, and rental car agencies, hoping to catch any trace of him. They checked surveillance videos, interviewed employees, and monitored transactions connected to his name. Yet no evidence appeared. Noah seemed to vanish the moment he stepped outside the mansion. There were no bank withdrawals, no passport scans, and no online activity from his accounts. It was as if he had been swallowed by the night, leaving no digital or physical trail. The lack of clues raised an even darker possibility. Investigators began to wonder if Noah wasn't the running from guilt, but rather from something else happening inside the mansion. The precision of the crime scenes, the lack of struggle, and the eerie calmness throughout the house suggested an element of control that didn't match Noah's profile. Detectives questioned whether he had been threatened, manipulated, or even targeted before the tragedy occurred. As theories multiplied, one unsettling idea gained ground. Perhaps Noah had known the danger was coming. Perhaps leaving the house was not an escape from responsibility, but a desperate move to survive something no one else in the family saw or believed. And with no trace of him anywhere, the world was left with only questions and the growing fear that whatever Noah fled from might still be lurking in the shadows, unseen and unanswered. Weeks later, a breakthrough came when investigators searched the basement more thoroughly and discovered a hidden storage room behind the wine racks. The entrance was concealed by a sliding panel that blended seamlessly with the surrounding shelves, suggesting that only someone in the family knew of its existence. Inside, the room was dimly lit and lined with small cabinets, stacked boxes, and a single metal desk covered in papers. Among these items were detailed journals written by Jacob Brenner, revealing a side of him even darker than the public could have imagined. The pages documented the intense pressure he placed on his children, focusing most heavily on Noah. He wrote endlessly about discipline, legacy, and expectation, describing Noah as the only one capable of maintaining the family's legacy, a phrase repeated throughout the journals in increasingly obsessive tones. Jacob's writings described rigid plans for his children's futures, leaving no room for choice or personal ambition. He outlined strict schedules, punishments, and rewards, portraying parenting as a mission to mold perfect heirs rather than nurturing individuals. The entries suggested that Noah bore the brunt of these expectations from a young age. He was groomed, trained, and closely monitored, with Jacob recording every perceived flaw and every small success. The journals painted a picture of a father consumed by control, convinced that only Noah could uphold everything he had built. Investigators realized that the pressure inside the Brenner home may have been far more suffocating than anyone outside the family ever guessed. Forensics soon uncovered a second twist that changed the direction of the investigation. After conducting extensive toxicology tests, it was determined that the entire family, including Jacob himself, had been poisoned with a fast-acting substance administered within a very narrow time frame. The dose was strong enough to kill within minutes, making it impossible for Jacob to have harmed the others and then taken his own life afterward. The synchronized nature of the poisoning threatened the initial theories and forced investigators to consider an even more perplexing scenario. No struggle, no forced entry, no signs of panic, just a silent, calculated method that affected every victim at once. The most disturbing detail emerged when investigators reached the final journal entry Jacob had written. It was dated the night of the murders and described a rising conflict between father and son. Jacob mentioned confronting Noah over a decision he refused to follow, though the journal never clarified what that decision was. The entry ended abruptly mid-sentence, the ink trailing off as if Jacob had been interrupted suddenly. The timing placed the confrontation dangerously close to the moment the poison would have taken hold, suggesting a final encounter that might have triggered everything that followed. Despite the new clues, Noah remained missing. No bank withdrawals appeared, no digital activity surfaced, and no confirmed sightings were reported anywhere in the country. His trail went cold the moment he stepped through the garage door. Investigators considered every possibility, but all evidence pointed toward a single unsettling conclusion. Noah had uncovered a dark secret within his family, acted to escape a dangerous situation, and disappeared before he became the next victim. Whether he ran out of fear, guilt, or self-preservation remained unknown. To this day, the Thanksgiving mass murder of the Brenner family remains one of the most chilling unsolved cases in fictional true crime history. Each discovery answered one question while creating several more, leaving the world with a story defined by silence, mystery, and shadows. And at the center of it all stood the only missing witness, the boy who walked into the night and never came back, becoming the world's most mysterious fugitive.